Okay, we've got our distribution panel in. This is the one that we're going to be putting in, the Paneltronics AC 6 circuit. There's only 4 in here. We got 2 extra spots. We have our project box that we're going to mount it into the lid. And normally you'd want to mount it on the inside, but because everything connects to the back side of the distribution block, we're going to actually mount it in the lid so that we have access to the back side of it when we want to add a new circuit. We're going to cut another hole in the bottom to run the wires through. So when it's mounted, we'll have it up in here. Wires will come through the bottom, mount to the back of the distribution block. Then we can turn it on and off without having to open it up. So we'll put the lid down here. Need to figure out where this hole is going to be. So I'm going to lay this on the top here. Put a little spacer under here because the circuit switches stick up, so it won't lay flat for me. There we go. Try to get it as centered as possible. Then we're going to mark our locations. We're going to check it with our measuring tool there. Try to do 2 things at once here. Doesn't usually work for me. Alright. Got a better marking device. Took the inner part of a pen out so we can stick it down through these holes here. So we want to mark where the holes are going to be, not the outer part of this panel, because you don't want the panel to fall through the hole that you're going to cut here. So mark our holes. I'm going to use those as a reference and cut a square hole just to the inside of that for the breakers to slip into, but this outer flange will stay on the outside of the panel here. Get that in there. Now we got our 4 holes on there. We'll take a measurement of how far inside the holes this surface here is going to be. So we don't want to cut our hole this big. We want to cut our hole this big. So we'll take that hole as a reference point. Get up there. And we cut about 1/4 of an inch on the inside of it, and a little less than 1/4 of an inch on that side of it, all the way around. We should have a big enough hole for this to just slip right in. Another way that we could do that is do all of this in paper and make a paper template and transfer it over here. And we might still do that. I'm going to do some measurements on here. I'm going to draw a square on here and see if we can get it pretty close. And then we'll decide whether we're going to go with a paper or cardboard template. But I think we should be fine just doing it this way. So, find our little dot over here. Measure in a little less than 1/4 of an inch. There we go. Alright. Now, in theory, we have a nice grid. There we get the glare off of it. And hopefully we've got it nice and square and straight. We should be able to cut that out and drop our panel inside there. I'm going to kind of eyeball it here for a second. It is a little bit to the right where the latches are, but I'm actually fine with that because I want a little bit more gap over here near the hinges so that I don't have to worry about wires being tucked back up in there in the edge. Bring it over here a little bit. I got a little bit more room to work with. And to the calibrated eyeball, it looks nice and square. It's not tilted over to the side one way or the other. Not enough for anybody to care about. And it's going to be inside the ambulance, behind a panel when it's installed. Nobody's going to see it but me and whoever I pointed out to, and of course you guys. But y'all can't see if it's square or not. As far as you know, it's perfect. Alright, so lay this on here. Put this panel right up on top of here, just kind of do a quick eyeball check on it. Looks like we're going to be close. We may have to extend it just a tiny bit in one direction. But because this thing won't lay completely flat on it, it's very difficult to tell. Looks like we may have to etch one corner of it out. If you look at this panel, this grounding screw right here sticks out a little bit more into this imaginary line than, like say, this nice square corner here. So we may have to route that out a little bit. But what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and cut the face out of this so we can put this in here and see exactly what we need to cut out, because I don't want to cut any more out than I absolutely have to. So, what we've decided we're going to do is we're going to use a Dremel cutoff wheel to cut this, which is right here. But before I do that, I actually want to get one of my weight bags and put inside this box so it's not sliding around while I'm trying to cut it. I kept around after my son left home was his ankle weight bags, because they worked really good in the garage for weighing things down, so I don't have to grab another set of hands or clamp something down. It's not going to slide around on its own, but I can pick it up and move it if I need to. So, if you have any extra weight bags laying around, they're great shop tools. Alright, we got our Dremel here, cutoff wheel on it, using the bigger fiber wheel just because it should cut through this plastic pretty well without breaking those little tiny ones. Give this a shot and see how it comes out. And one of the things to keep in mind when you're cutting this thick plastic with the Dremel cutoff wheel is that as you're cutting, it's melting as much as it's actually cutting. So it wants to go back behind where you just cut and remelt back together. So you want to be careful that you go a little bit at a time and go back and cut that, but don't let it grab the wheel because it will want to take off on you. So go just back and forth a little bit. Only stick the wheel down just enough to barely cut through the material. Don't try to like bury the wheel all the way down it, because it will grab it, yank it out of your hands, break the wheel, do all sorts of other fun things. Alright, so we got 2 cuts done. We're going to clean it up in a minute. Let's finish the other 2 cuts. See what we got. Alright, now the fun part. Back here a little bit. There we go. Falls right in there. Break it a little bit. Handy dandy little panel. Do that on the workbench. Pretend we're going to use it later and then never do. And just break this melted plastic off around the edge here. Clean this up a little bit. We'll get the file out in a second and make it look real nice. Get the big stuff out of the way. Get the big bag out of here. Throw that down there so I can trip over it later. Alright. Just take the rough file and knock the edges off. Want to spend too much time on this because this is going to be hidden. But you want just enough so it'll lay flush. Since it's not metal, you don't really have to worry about cutting your finger on it. There we go. Right. Trash can. All right. Project box with a hole in the lid, one distribution panel into the box, and it looks like we're just a little bit small. Real close on this tight corner up here. You can see right here we got this one wire that wants to catch just a little bit, so we can go a little bit wider on that. little bit on the bottom. Looks like we got to go just a little bit wider right here to get that to slip down in there. So mark that with the Sharpie and readdress it and see where we're at. Not gonna draw a straight line today at all. Alright. Take this out of the way. Know what we got. So in the bottom corner here, we're going to cut a little bit out so those bottom lugs will slip right in there. You could go all the way across here, but I don't see that that's necessary. I'm just going to cut a little bit of a notch here. And the same thing with this up here, just enough for that wire to pass it. You could also cut this a little bit more, but I really don't want to cut more than I have to. So I'm going to try cutting those out and then go from there. Okay, so we got our tools, we got our panel, put it in here. We're going to screw it to the front face of this. And it's very close to the holes that we marked. And we're not going to worry about that now, because now we have a hole made for it. We're going to fasten it straight to it. So the first thing we're going to do, is it came with its own set of screws, little black tapered ones there. So we're going to drill a pilot hole for them, just to make it a little bit easier to go in there. Real nice and centered. I think I have the world's dullest drill bit for drilling in plastic. Easy to drill through that. There we go. Should not be that hard to drill through plastic. Switch our bits over. Where's the bit I took out of there? There it is. Okay. Stick a screw in there. Okay. And there we go. Mount it in there, nice and secure. Open it up, mount all our wires on it. Slack will be in here. When it's in operation, this is all you're going to see. Alright, so let's go take this and mock it up in the ambulance and see where it's going to go. Alright, so here we are in front of the wiring cabinet. This is where the old panel was that we took out. This is the new one. We're going to put it right here, actually fairly close to where the other one was mounted. We may use some of the same screw holes. Our wiring feed in from the bottom. It'll come up underneath here. And then when we get ready to hook things up, we'll be able to open this up, bring the wire in, wire it up, shut it. So with this being in here, right there, come on, work with me here. There we go. So the idea is to put that there, The battery charger we've talked about before should mount right here underneath it. Be fairly cozy in this cabinet, but we'll be able to control the circuits a little bit better. So after we get this mounted in here, we're going to put a plug down here in the far corner, which you may not be able to see, to actually plug the battery charger into. Because like I said, we don't want to cut this off. There's no reason to cut good stuff apart. So what we will do is we'll turn off the video and take some measurements and mark some holes, and then we'll start it back up right when we actually decide to do the work. Alright, so we added the feet to it so we can mount it on the wall in there. And what we're going to do is we're going to drill a 2-inch hole in the bottom of it so we can feed the wires up into the box. So what we'll do is take a quick measurement and try to get a centered, it's not going to be big enough, so we'll just make a guess here. 6 inches, so roughly 3 inches from the edge. I mean, we're not building a rocket here, so something fairly close there, just so we have a rough idea where the center of the box is. There we go. So you have a nice little red dot. We'll grab a hole saw, run a hole right up through there, and before we actually drill, move that out of the way so that we don't drill a hole into the bottom of our bus bars there. Plug in. Now, run our wires up there, hook them to the back of the panel, and we'll have power. Alright, we got the panel mounted in here to the wall. This is how it's going to look when we're finally done. We got the door on it. So we're going to run the wires up through the hole we've cut here in the bottom of it. Run them over here, hook them up, and pull a little bit of slack out. And when we're done, that's what it's going to look like. So we're going to cut the heavy 10 gauge wire that we're using for the input. We'll stick that up in there. We've got power for our outlets. We're going to stick up in there, and then we got the refrigerator circuit. We're going to bring all these wires down, stick them up in the bottom. Alright, we've got the panel hooked up. We got it mounted inside the cabinet here. We went ahead and hooked the wiring up. Like I said, we had to come up through the bottom here, wire it into the terminals itself. I'm not going to point out to where they actually hook up to because it is hooked up. We got one circuit hooked up for the outlets in here. We're going to hook up the others later. We're going to go ahead and has a little bit of tension on it because that 10 gauge wire is pretty heavy. But it's all mounted in there. This is how it's going to look. When we get ready to plug into shore power, we turn on our main power here, and then our different circuits down here. Now I know that this one's a 10 amp. I don't have anything hooked to that right now. These two are 15 and this one's 30. I'm going to keep that one in reserve for the air conditioner or the refrigerator. I have to look at the draw on both of those. This one's not hooked up right now. This one is plugged in, hooked up to our 110 circuit over here. I'm going to put a label in there as soon as we turn it on. No magic smoke coming out, no sparks. That's a good sign. And if you can see, back here, we have our outlet working. So now that we know that this is hooked up and working, we're going to go ahead and turn the power back off, put that back into the wall, and hook our light up to that one circuit. So the only things that will be on this one circuit will be that outlet and that light.